podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, and that is Pastor Andy Spencer. Andy is a pastor in New Brunswick, and we're going to ask Andy, welcome, Andy, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you ended up in New Brunswick, because your accent is going to give you away.
Yeah, I emigrated to Canada back in 2006, originally from the south coast of England. So cities like Portsmouth, Southampton, Brighton, right on the coast of England. Had a young family. At that point in the UK, my background actually, I went into the military at 16 as a junior soldier. I did 4 years in the military. And then I worked for the Body Shop Cosmetic Company at their headquarters for 15 years in human resources and in their business ethics department. And then at the end of that 15 years, I had a sense of wanting to serve my community in a greater way. And so I applied to become a police officer. But actually, there was an 18-month wait for that. So I actually became an undertaker for a year and a half, um, waiting to get into police training college. And then again, as a police officer, I spent 4 years doing that. And that really gave me a broader understanding of the situation of things like crime, a greater understanding of the UK and all of its in-depth happenings. And I had a young family at that point, realizing that the world was a smaller place and seeking to broaden our horizons. And so we actually went to an immigration fair to notice that the smaller provinces were looking for skilled labor. And so I actually went back to school in the process and I retrained as a plumber. And I ran my own plumbing company for a few years while applying for immigration. And the province of New Brunswick, they fast track your application. And so what typically would take nearly 5 years to emigrate took us 14 months. And so that's primarily how we ended up in New Brunswick. And on arrival into New Brunswick, uh, unfortunately, my wife suffered a massive brain tumor within a year of us arriving. And so I then stepped out from the workplace to take care of my wife. And in the process was volunteering at a church that we'd been welcomed to. Eventually, I took on the children's ministry just as a volunteer. And at the time, I was working for the city of St. John in human resources, looking after the police officers, firefighters, and the lead pastor at the church asked if I would prayerfully consider becoming the family pastor at Rosse Baptist Church. And so that was in 2007. And so, yeah, I spent 6 years at Rosse Baptist Church, which is where I first implemented Plan to Protect. From there, we moved to Guelph in Ontario, and I did 6 years as the family pastor at Calvary Baptist Church, where again, I implemented Plan to Protect. And then the Lord moved us to the capital, to Ottawa, to plant a church called West Village. And I had the privilege of implementing Plan to Protect there too. And then after 3 years, the Lord called us back to New Brunswick to True Life Church. And that's just a name change. So it was originally Rosse Baptist. And so now this is my second pastoral term back in New Brunswick. And that really for us is home. We had a sense that we would eventually return to New Brunswick, semi-retirement or retirement, but the Lord had different plans, and I'm now the executive pastor at True Life Church. So there's a brief potted history.
Well, we'll learn more about True Life in just a moment, but you're a man of many, many talents and many careers. I always tease Andy that we should have him moving around to many different churches to implement Plan to Protect, because he's implemented it at so many different churches now. And we just really have appreciated the longevity of our relationship with Andy and the churches where he serves. So thanks, Andy, for that briefing. You really are a man of many talents and background. So, tell us a little bit about True Life. How large of a church is this? Where is it located? Um, how many children, youth, vulnerable people are at the church?
Yeah, so True Life Church is situated in a valley along a large water system, actually, on the St. John River, uh, in between Rothesay and Quispamsis. So not too far from Moncton, Sussex. So we're probably about 15-minute drive from the coast of St. John. And our church, again, used to be Rothesay Baptist, now True Life Church. And again, with the rotation of people that come across a month, we would see probably around 650 people. The average Sunday would be about 475, close to 500. And the makeup of the church, so we've been growing substantially. We were very fortunate in that all through COVID, we were able to maintain meeting as a church because our church is so big, multiple parking lots and washrooms. The local authority allowed me to create a 40-foot divide in the middle of our church, and we could have congregation A and congregation B, different washrooms, different parking lots. And so we actually maintained momentum. And since that, there's been a real appreciation within our community, and they've certainly blessed us in wanting to become a part of our church family. So on a Sunday morning, we have our kids' life, and that averages 90 to 100 children on a Sunday morning. On a Sunday evening, we have Awana, and they have approximately 165 children that attend
Wow,
Awana. Yeah, that's wonderful.
a
And
large number.
it is, and it takes a large number of volunteers too. So we have 60 volunteers to run our Awana program with all the readers and listeners and leaders. Um, and then our youth group, that's grown exponentially. So it would typically would have been around 45 to 50, but in the last 2 years, we've regularly been getting 90 to 110 at times on a Wednesday evening for youth. And then we have another ministry of our church, and that's our school, our Christian school, Valley Christian Academy. And again, the Lord's seen fit to continue growing. And already, although we've just stepped into summer, the school are predicting 165 children in our school. And then our vulnerable adults, we would at the 80 to 100 potentially vulnerable adults as our seniors age and different circumstances enter into their life. But the average congregation member would be quite young families, lots of new babies being born. So yeah, we're having a real season of growth and excitement. Yeah.
That is exciting. Your portfolio must be huge. You said you're the executive pastor. You've got so many people at the church. I can just imagine the things that are on your portfolio, plus the school. Why are you so inspired? And Plan to Protect has always been forefront in your mind. Wherever you go, for Plan to Protect is forefront. What's your inspiration behind that? Like, probably your police work, would that have impacted it, or what would you
Yeah,
say
very
biggest impact?
definitely. Yeah, my police work for sure. But actually, as I was thinking about that, the if I go back to my childhood, I have very vivid memories of the adults, the leaders, the people that were there for me as a child and enabled me to thrive. Um,
Mm.
and when I train, I'm a bit like a stuck record, but I have a bit of a phrase where I talk about love, care, nurture, and protection. And that's certainly a reflection of my childhood. And so I carry that with me and I reflect upon that as I look upon the lives of the children and the youth and the vulnerable adults that God brings into our care. But certainly as a police officer, I've seen situations where abuse prevention hasn't been in place and the consequences of that. But equally experienced as a community police officer, organizations that have had that in place, and how young people, young adults and the community have been able to thrive due to that. But there's another insight too, as I spoke earlier about my daughter Cora. So we adopted her when she was 2.5. Um, so she came from a foster home. Um, she was alcohol fetal, a drug baby. She had a stroke in the womb, and she has multiple learning disabilities. But as I experienced the foster home, and the love that they gave her in the 2 years that they cared for her, a Christian family, um, we actually adopted them as grandparents, so they journey with us even now, which is amazing. But as they continue to foster, um, my wife and I can't help but get involved and understand the consequences of what happens to children as they're bounced through the foster system, multiple homes. And within New Brunswick, the desired effect is to have children reunited with their biological families, and that doesn't always go well. And so some success in those moments, but then equally heartbreaking situations of where abuse is really prevalent and the child enters back into that situation. And so that really is a stimulus again for me. Um, and then God's call, as I think about his love, grace, and mercy that he showers upon me each and every day, the protection he provides for me and my family. It's an opportunity for me, as best as I can, to become the hands and feet of Jesus in that moment. And as I become a pastor and I look back upon my life, God has connected all the dots. And now I understand why I was a police officer and why I went to all these different places. But one prevalent thing for me is when I worked for the Body Shop cosmetic company, I spent 6 years in Romania working in orphanages and with street kids, and the abuse was just beyond, um, to the point where there were 350 children in one particular orphanage and only 10 staff. And so that the way that they would get the children to do what they wanted to do was through, beating them or abusing them. And so I carry some really deep experiences with me, um, that really, yeah, ignite a passion within me to make completely the opposite the experience for the children and youth and the vulnerable that God brings into my care, for sure. So there's lots of different things that drive my passion for this. Yeah.
I love um, talking to people and hearing what inspired them to take safeguarding so seriously. And thank you so much for sharing your heart around that. I always say that so many people, and I know this from experience, that so many churches and organizations do safeguarding because they want to qualify for abuse coverage, and I always say that's an added benefit, but really, uh, what inspired Plan to Protect from starting in the very beginning was that children matter. And as we have expanded to vulnerable adults, even individuals with disabilities like your daughter, and even the elderly, those are the lives that matter.
Mm,
Um, Yes, children matter, the elderly matter, individuals with disabilities matter, and behind every sector of our society, there are stories. There's stories like you just shared that have inspired people to really become advocates within their organizations for safeguarding. And I know, and I already referenced this, Andy, safeguarding Plan to Protect is not the only thing on your portfolio. There are many things. What else do you do on a day-to-day basis other than Plan to Protect? We're going to come back to Plan to Protect in a
right.
minute. What are the other things that are on your plate?
Yeah. So at a point where I returned to New Brunswick, the lead pastor at that time, God gave him an avenue to retire. And so the youth pastor then stepped in to become the lead pastor, and he asked if I would prayerfully consider becoming the executive to support him. So yeah, I wear many hats. I oversee, along with the lead pastor, our finance, human resources, so pay, benefits, all those kind of things due to previous experience. Building and maintenance, I look after that too. I do all of our, aside from Plan to Protect, I do all of our policy writing. Um, I also oversee the men's ministry. Um, and then I have sort of joint oversight along with the lead pastor and our principal with the school. Um, so yeah, it's very broad.
So, how often does your mind shift back to plan to protect? So, how often would you say that you think, oh, I need to put this through the filter of plan to protect, or think about your role and responsibilities under plan to protect?
Yeah, so it would be daily, to be honest, and actually multiple points throughout the day. I mean, even with the portfolio being so large, each of those portfolios has an impact on plan to protect. So as I think about building and maintenance, so some of the design modifications that we might need in order to have better access to view into rooms, um, things like entry and exit to our school, how we monitor that, um, line of sight as our children move around the school or around the church. Finances obviously has a big role because finances are needed for building and maintenance that affect our plan to protect. And equally, when it comes to training, for my training, that kind of thing. Um, so with incident reports, they all come to me. They'll go to the different department heads once they're completed, and then they'll filter them to me. And so I receive them. Now, this is a good thing. I receive them daily. Um, I, I speak to the,
Good
I,
thing. That
yeah.
is really a good thing. I always say if you don't get incident reports, that's not a good thing. 'Cause
So
incidents always
yeah,
happen.
when I say during the training, I say to them, now, this isn't a competition. But actually the school are a little better at it than the church. So I sort of play them off against each other. Not that we want thousands, because then we'd have an issue. But so every day they come to me, I read them all and I sign and I date them. And that enables me, along with our staff and our volunteers, that enables me to watch for patterns, the telling of a story through those incidents. And then I can reach out to our staff or our volunteers if things become aware to me that actually this is becoming a bit too frequent. We need to sit down, talk about this. And then even to the point where it would generate me asking, has anybody or did this individual contact child and family services? And then with regards to training, so we do, as best as I can, I do every other month. I do a refresher and I do a full orientation every other month. So that would be
Mm.
12 training sessions a year. Um, and currently on our Plan to Protect roster, we have at the moment 258 volunteers, I think it is. And it continues to
I was
grow.
just
So each,
gonna ask Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, how many staff do you have? How many volunteers do you have?
so we have 23 teachers in the school. We have 9 members of staff in the church. So if we said 40 staff, so then we're talking a good 210 volunteers. So to get them through their refreshers every year, I need multiple refresher trainings. Um, and then I specialize with some because we run a water ski camp. We run a VBS, and so I do specific trainings for them in the lead up to those events, just for those particular groups of people. And so, yeah, it would be daily and sometimes multiple points in the day where I interact with Plan to Protect. Yeah.
I'm just going to address something that you talked about, incident report forms. When we encourage our clients to use incident report forms, and you know this, Andy, but for the sake of our listeners, we recommend anything out of the ordinary that happens, any bumps, bruises, any injuries, bullying, any suspicions of abuse, complete an incident report form so you can watch for, as Andy said, patterns and areas that you need to adjust and shift. So sounds like your team has really bought into that. Good job, Andy. That's great. Yeah. What would you say is your biggest challenge with safeguarding?
The biggest challenge, I think at a personal level, when I transferred from a family pastor to an executive, so I don't have direct contact with the children and the youth anymore, and the leaders as such that would oversee those children. And so now being the exec, I'm sort of one step removed. So that then means I need to have a greater, and I have a good relationship, but I need a greater relationship with the leaders that oversee those areas because they don't come immediately under me. They come under the family pastor. So just being that one step removed now, where I'm used to being in direct contact with all the leaders and with all the kids and with all the youth. Um, and again, that's just how I'm driven too. I'm that kind of person. So this is completely new to me, although nearly 5 years now being the executive pastor.
Do
Uh,
you get any resistance, Andy, from screening and training?
Actually, no, I don't tend to. Um, Again, I try not I try not to blow my own trumpet, but because I'm so passionate about it, I try my best to transfer that passion. And so once people have sat under a full orientation, or I've been a part of an interview um, with one of our department heads, and I get to share some of what I've shared with you, that creates some momentum. Um, no, and I try to explain to people that as they look at Plan to Protect, some people look at it that it can be a lot of red tape, that it ties people down. But in that moment, that gives me the opportunity to actually set them free. So I challenge myself with my passion to allow them to know that yes, there's a lot involved, but with us all working together, actually our abuse prevention policies and practices actually free us up to do ministry and to do it well. It's not cumbersome, it's not red tape. And so to get them to look at things through that lens, that actually helps too. Yeah.
That whole idea of community, that it's not just one of us, it takes a whole team, it takes a whole church in your setting to safeguard those
Mm.
that are vulnerable and also safeguard ourselves. You've got like 250 people to protect from wrongful allegations of abuse. So it really does take a whole team to do that. And Andy, you absolutely can toot your own horn. Oh, I'm going to toot it for you. In that Andy has just accomplished a huge feat. Andy, you applied for the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence. And can you tell the listeners what that application process was like?
Um, yeah, I mean, again, if I'm honest, it may be a little daunting at the front end. Again, as I think about my portfolio and the width and breadth of what I do, so it's a really in-depth, full review of all of our practices, processes, those things. Um, yeah, it's not about having all your, although we want all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed, it isn't about that. It's about aiding us in our journey towards that. And knowing, for me anyway, I like to be a lifelong learner, and I know that we'll never be 100% where we need to be, but we need to be working towards those things. And so to be able to take the time, process by process, policy by policy, and unpack what we were doing, how we were doing it, the things that we could get better at. And I have, a few of those things that we will be working on and that we do need to work on. Um, yeah, again, it is thorough. It takes a good amount of time, and rightly so. Um, but I'm looking forward to, yeah, taking a hold of those things where I don't know if that's the right term. We didn't meet the mark, but to aim towards getting there. So yeah, it wasn't unenjoyable. It was a good thing. Very definitely a good thing.
Did you ever question in your mind that you would become a SEAL recipient or that you'd be able to meet the standard that Plan to Protect recommends? As you know, we recommend 7 standards. And for those that are listening to the podcast today, the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence is not just about checking off a box saying, yes, I do these things, but actually demonstrating and providing evidence that you're doing these things.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I always coach people who apply for it. We're not just looking for you to tell us you have policies, but provide us your policies. Show us your training schedule. Show us that you do fill out incident report forms and that you screen your volunteers and staff and um, that there is leadership buy-in within the church. So we ask for evidence to meet that standard. And Andy, did you ever wonder and question as you were in the process of applying that you would qualify?
Yeah, because there were areas where once I'd completed it, I felt confident in submitting it. And then there were other areas, again, like I say, where I didn't think we met the mark or there was a way to go. And so it would have been in some of those areas. Um, so yeah, it was a case of, does it need to be 100% in each area? But again, demonstrating, I think in most of them that we were heading in the right direction, although we weren't all or completely where we needed to be. So yeah, there were some seeds of doubt, but healthily so. Um, and even as I completed it and recognized that there was still a work to be done, there was I think this is the right terminology, but there's a healthy dissatisfaction and a desire to make good in those areas. Yeah.
There must have also been some peace of mind and some a bit of pride, and it can be a healthy pride that from where you were when you first came to the church and the school
Yeah.
and where you are now. And you don't need to get 100% to get the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence. There is a jury, a panel of peers that review the submission. And we had a panel of, I think, 4 or 5 people that reviewed Andy's submission, and Andy did meet the mark. He is one of the few people, churches, organizations that have actually received the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence. He can now use the logo, the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence logo, which I think will be a real draw to things like your Awana program and your water ski um, you know, club and camp and your um, even the school. I mean, if I'm going to enroll my child in a school in the area, what a draw to know that this school has met the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence. And
Yeah. And two, I'm keen to, I haven't had opportunity to share with everybody. So I'm really keen as opportunity presents itself to draw everybody in and just to thank them for their buy-in, their commitment to it. Um, yeah, again, it's not a one-man show. It's an entire team and community that have made this possible. And again, previous experience, the privilege of having journeyed with you, Melodie and Victoria, over the years. Now, what, nearly 18 years, I've had the privilege of working alongside you guys and benefiting from knowledge and experience and the various environments. And now being back in New Brunswick, I've been able to implement all that I've learned in that path, yeah, to where we are now.
Well, you'll have to share the podcast with your staff and your community, and certainly you can toot your horn and the church's school's horn, because that is a huge feat to be able to qualify for the Plan to Protect Seal of Excellence. We don't just give that away to anybody, but you have certainly deserved it. Andy, do you do this on your own?
No,
Just
again, yeah, it's a massive effort on everybody's part. Fortunately, our new lead pastor, he when I moved away for those 6 years, he became the Plan to Protect trainer whilst I was away. And so, with him now being the lead pastor, I have somebody that's lived and breathed Plan to Protect. So, to have our lead pastor sort of spearheading and it is great. And again, just a wonderful team that support me and our church in what we're able to do through our Plan to Protect.
so we encourage you and not to rest on your laurels, to
Mhm.
continue to improve. And you've even alluded to that and hinted that there's things that you want to still do to improve. What are some of those things that you want to put into place?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind as you ask that. So one of the things I want to do is I want to have um, I'm a little nervous to call it a committee. Committees can become a little unruly. So I want to initiate, set up a Plan to Protect advisory team. And that would draw an individual from each of the ministries, an elder, a parent from the school, and also one of the older youth from our youth group, and one of our older children from the school who are on the school leadership committee. And so that way, then I would have each of our, this is a very business orientated term, but um, we'd have each of our stakeholders sitting on that advisory team. And to a degree, they then can become an extension of me and also become my eyes and ears as the ministry continues to grow. And then,
Hello.
yeah. And so then with the school, um, yeah, a little bit of a history with the school in that they were using the same Plan to Protect policy prior to me coming back. And then as I reviewed the school, it became apparent that they needed their own Plan to Protect policy. And that's when I reached out to you and sought some assistance in what that would look like for a Christian school. And so there's still a work to be done there. I want to do a full review of the Plan to Protect policy. And we have a new principal starting in 2 weeks' time, actually. So it's the opportune moment to do that. But there are things like in the public school system, children, depending on their age, would be dismissed from their class, and the majority of them make their own way home. And so, a term that I picked up from you many years ago is the good, better, best. And then I also talk about us reaching for the platinum standard. So, one thing I'm particularly keen on reviewing is our dismissal policy in how we dismiss children, depending on the grade, from school. My desire is that our principal and each of the teachers, when they get home, can sit comfortably in the knowledge that each child got away with the right parent and actually made it home. So some are picked up, some walk home, some cycle home. Some of the older children actually drive their own vehicles. And so, what does that look like to better safeguard all those different elements as we dismiss our children from school each day? And even to the point of when the parents release them from home, um, and maybe they don't make it to school, there's a bit of a grey area between parental supervision and what then becomes the remit of the school. So I've been thinking about that one for a while, and really want to get to grips with that. Yeah.
And when you hear heartbreaking stories in the news, even from the Maritimes, where
Hmm.
children have gone missing,
Yeah.
it's so important to provide good supervision. I would think that would be one of the worst nightmares under your watch would be if a child went missing,
Yeah.
either because they were dismissed, and assuming the parents had them, the parents assumed the school had them, but that they fell through the cracks. So thank you for that, Andy. That would just encourage you, even to continue to raise up our. Now you're going to put a challenge on my plate, not only to have a plan to protect seal of excellence, but now I need to work on a platinum plan to protect seal of excellence. So so, Andy, what encouragement would you give to other pastors, school administrators who have so many responsibilities like you have, but are finding it challenging to stay focused on safeguarding, and they're not thinking about safeguarding on a daily basis or probably even a weekly basis, like you are? What challenge and encouragement would you give them?
Again, depending on the environment, my daily reflection is God's grace upon my life and the hand of blessing that He has upon our church. And so, just again, that love, care, nurture, and protection that God provides me every day, and that the challenge for me is that I'm to be that extension, and again to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And as I mentioned, it can for some seem all-consuming. Um, but the turnaround for sure is people having that lens of realizing that actually having the right policies, plans, and procedures in place actually sets us free to do what God is calling us to. And as I look at the wider community, particularly with our school, there has become a little bit of a dissatisfaction with things that are happening within the community, within public schools and the wider environment. And so more and more and more people are looking to us, um, and they're trusting us. And we see that trust as our numbers continue to grow when they see what it is that we're able to provide. And again, it's that love, that care, that nurture, that protection. Um, And not very often do you get to hear end results. And so, just to share a quick story with you, two weeks ago, I did a refresher training, and a lady stayed behind at the end. We actually sat talking for nearly 2 hours after the training, actually. And she had come to me, it was about a year and a half before that, and she had observed a situation of abuse taking place in her community. So, it wasn't anything to do with the school or the church. And I met with her multiple times and was able to guide her through calling child and family services. And like I say, very rarely do you get to hear the outcome. And so she sat with me after the training and she said, I can't thank you enough for the training you provide, for the time that you spent with me, the way you guided me through the process. And she said, actually, the situation of abuse that I actually reported, she said, the person who I thought was the abuser was actually the one that was being abused. And so she said, I remember from your training that, as we hear of situations, that we're not to become judgmental, that we're to leave it to the proper authorities to investigate. And that as a church, particularly as a church, we have an opportunity to minister to those that find themselves in those situations. And so it was wonderful, a rarity, but to hear of something that goes full circle and you get to understand the impact of what we do and why we do it and the outcome. So that's my encouragement, to know that what you do in moments like that makes a real difference and it can be life-saving. Yeah.
Really can be life-saving, and so often we don't know the outcome of the efforts we do,
Mm.
but, what a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, for spending this time with us. I know you're on vacation. You're celebrating the life of a new grandchild. So thank you for taking time out to do that. Congratulations, by the way,
Mhm.
both for being a new grandpa, but also the amazing feat of meeting the intent of the Plan to Protect standard of protection and achieving the seal of excellence. Way to go. Really proud of you. And it has honestly been a joy for us to walk the last 18 to 20 years with you and to see the work that you're doing. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you. You're very welcome. Thank you to you too. Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed working alongside you and Victoria and Maria. And as the team grows, to see new people come on board, it's wonderful to see. Yeah. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again next month.